Welcome to another episode of Xpandables by Fibonacci X. Let's kick things off with a quick rundown of last week funding activities. A total of 249 millions were raised across 22 deals, out of which 184 million came in at the growth stage, spread across 7 deals. Leading the chart was Rocket Lane, which raised 60 million from Insight Partners. Rocket Lane operates in the professional service automation space, and the fresh capital will be used to scale its customer boarding platform, invest further in product innovation, and expand its global footprint. On the early stage fund, startup raised a total of $65 million across 15 deals. Deccan AI emerged as a top performer in the fundraising part in the segment, securing 25 millions from A91 Partners. The company focuses on AI post-training services, including data generation and evaluation. Now shifting gears to today's focus, that's the AI sector. So far in 2026, AI startups have collectively raised around 268 millions across early stage and growth stages, highlighting strong investor conviction in the space. To help us unpack this trend and deep dive into where AI is headed, today we have Yugal Kishore, co-founder and CEO of Flow Pilot and former head of product of OakNorth, who's building the future of workflow automation. So,
All
Yugal,
right.
you're welcome. You can
Thank
introduce
you.
yourself and let us
Sure,
know
then.
more about yourself and Flow Pilot 7 you are
Absolutely.
building.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think I was amazed by the numbers you said about last week, so we'll get into that later. But hi, Yugal, this side, co-founder and CEO of Flow Pilot by Svelto. We're building an operations OS, so this is a small correction from sort of positioning we were doing up until a couple of weeks ago. An operations OS that essentially helps you run your business for small and mid-market Indian businesses. To make it very daily parlance language, I would say we want all the SMEs to use AI to run everyday workflows that keep the business moving. Now, that could be from as simple as approvals to their inventory to sales, marketing, procurement, finance. The reason why we're doing this is we realized that a lot of SMEs, at least in India, I mean, maybe in the other parts of the world too, are literally running their business on WhatsApp spreadsheets and a hope that somebody remembers it. So yeah, we use AI kind of heavily under the hood to give us like really fast, reliable reasoning and out of the box process solutions for customers. My lens today would be very operator first. Most SME founders I have met and will continue to meet have never asked, hey, which AI model do you use? Is it Grok? Is it the latest Claude? I think what they ask is, how quickly can we go live? What happens when AI makes a mistake? And more crucially, how will this show up in our P&L? So yeah, that's my intro.
Okay. So, as you already mentioned, you were shocked by the numbers.
Yeah.
So, my first questions will be around numbers. So, as you see, the early stage AI funding is not. So, do you really think there's a real value in the early stage AI funding, or is there some hype in it?
I think there is actually value in early stage AI funding and I mean, I know you've given this start, so I'm not going to go into listing the names in the rounds. But if you look at AI funding, especially in India over the last 2 weeks or few weeks, you would see two sort of big buckets. One is infrastructure and model adjacent companies. Now, when we say that, I mean, what is really running the base of an AI, the models. So Deccan AI, as an example, which you said raised $25 million from, I think you named a investor, I'm forgetting, but
A91 Partners.
yeah, A91. So they provide high fidelity post training data and human evaluations for AI systems. And they already have Google DeepMind and Snowflake as their customers. So that itself proves that there's value in sort of early AI experiments, AI native solutions, and individuals in India and across the world who are trying to get into AI. The second category, other than infra, is sort of workflow native products. Now, this is almost like the opposite spectrum, which is first you have the base models in adjacent companies, and then you have people who are actually using it in workflows, processes to embed AI into sales, inventory, finance, and everything else for SMEs. So investors, I would say, are still writing checks, but if 2025 was the year when, if you just had, A and I in your name, you would get a big fat check. Sorry, that's not happening anymore. What you're going to see now is where the company sits in a real value chain, not just a demo, because let's face it, like everybody can use Lovable and Cursor and create a nice demo or even a working, I would say, alpha version of the product, but doesn't really run. Then whether there are like recurring workflows, processes that someone can solve on that AI product you made, it's not just a one-off pilot. And the last one is like, does your business model survive if your base model price drops and generic copilots get 10x better, which is like, let's say, if Microsoft decides tomorrow that, okay, I'm going to give everything in Copilot embedded with a lot of bang around it. So if these things are, getting check boxed against you as a founder, then yeah, you're doing something and you will get a check.
Okay. So, like I've already mentioned that the generic AI, which is on the rise. So, what percentage or what are your views on what is the AI solving the real problems and the generic AI?
That's a very heavy question for a Monday evening, but okay, let me attempt.
Okay.
I think if I could take the liberty of quoting some of the studies done recently by the big three consultants, a lot of Ivy Leagues, I think realistically, actual workflow and business problem coverage is probably around, I would say, sub, 20 percentage. Whereas
Okay.
a lot of generic, like very generalist sort of AI is still dominating like 80%. And we don't have to go far to sort of validate this, right? Like people like us who are always on some or the other form of social media, let's pick up X, formerly Twitter. I think I see more people using Grok to generate random images and, make mockery of people versus fact checking. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for like this big 80% versus 20%. There's a lot of scope for this 20% to eat into that 80% because, I mean, nobody made models just for, people like us to create nice images or nice videos of making fun of people. I think it was meant for something better. So, yeah.
I think like for images, I would see being a Gen Z or a younger kid myself, I also see a lot on Instagram and socials. We see a use of AI in more on a generic way. So, in terms of India's position in the global AI ecosystem, what do you think? Where do we stand right now?
I think India specific, we are doing actually amazingly well, if you ask me. And why I say that is because we have the infrastructure that is well, some of it is already built. And we have moved from, just talking about AI to actually deploying it. So some nitbits like we had the India AI mission launched, which was around 10,000 CR INR to build, compute infra, data sets, talent. Like think of it as very sovereign GPU clusters that Indian startups can tap into, which would be massive for all of us. So that we don't have to rely on just US or let's say European based cloud providers. Not that they're bad, but it's always good to have something indigenous,
Yes.
right? Then like platforms like India AI Kosh, there are thousands of India centric data sets and hundreds of AI models in areas like agriculture, healthcare, education, and MSME, which is ready to be reused. So this is on the policy and infra side in India. And on the product side, I would say like there's companies like Zoho, which are trying to integrate AI deeply into SME facing products. I mean, whether they're doing a good job or not, I should not chime in because, well, we kind of are trying to, eat into their market too. Then Deccan AI is an example, right? They've built a India-based expert network where I think they have 1 million registered contributors and some thousands of experts. They deliver high-fidelity training data. So players such as, Google and Snowflake. So to sum it up, I think India is playing three real roles: infra policy via the India AI mission, products and platforms like players such as ourselves, Flow Pilot. Then there is some bit Zoho is doing, some bit other players are doing. And then the third category is Deccan AI ones, which is high skill human in the loop evaluation.
Okay. My next question was actually about Deccan AI only. If there, what is like their area of gaining the traction in India? So we can elaborate that as well in the
Sure.
same.
Absolutely. I think Deccan is so when at least when I, based on my experience, think of products and solution, I think of wedge, right? What is the one wedge that you're focusing on? So Deccan is focused on a very real wedge and a very, I would say, massive bottleneck, which is models are getting powerful.
Yes.
Enterprises don't really care about very frivolous benchmarks, but what they care about now is high quality, domain specific feedback. So models, behave reliably in production and very rigorous evaluation so they can trust AI with higher stake tasks. So I believe that they can provide post training data and expert evaluations to labs and large enterprises. And this, I would say, is going to take it from, like, if we say today, can a model do something X? The next 5 years, we're going to say, can you trust model A to do X in production? So I think Deccan is trying to be that sort of trust certification, like, because trust has been a big thing when it comes to AI. You talk about hallucination, different kind of answers, same sort of prompt leading you into a very different answer based on two different individuals. So yeah, like, I would say, I mean, look, Deccan is doing great, but if I were to sort of reposition it, I would say they're like the trust certification certifier for AI usage in production and businesses. So yeah, that's what I think they said.
Okay. So that was a good answer. So moving forward, I would like to ask, like, understanding the moats in the AI businesses, which can be a very wide question. So if you can point some out.
Yeah, moats. I mean, moats are. It's actually surprising. Something that was, if I'm not mistaken, in my history is horrible. I don't like early 13th, 14th century French or British with moats filled with crocodiles around castles has now become such a big question in investing. But I mean, yeah, pun apart and history apart, AI is advancing at such a crazy pace that, like, I don't think you can sort of pick three KPIs as moats and say, okay, this is my moat. What I can say is, like, what I would pay attention to as an operator when it comes to moat is, A, do you have proprietary data and feedback loops? Like Tekken again is a great example there.
Hmm.
They collect expert feedback, evaluations at scale for training and fine tuning models, and they're building a data set and process that is hard to replicate because this is AI plus human in the loop. Second one would be the depth you have, in your function, like workflows. So if you become the default system for who approved what, when, and why across departments, ripping you out is painful because if you get embedded as an operating system for how your business runs, you have a moat. And then
Hmm.
the last one I would say is governance and trust, which is, do you have audit trails? Do you have policy enforcement? Are you explainable? So, yeah, I think these are sort of moats in AI business. If someone says that, oh, I'm using the latest Claude Opus 4.6, 4.7. I mean, they might have come out with something new. That's not really a moat, right? Because that's going to change overnight. And as I think initially said, founders, people who run businesses don't really care what model you're using. So, yeah, these are the moats from my vantage point.
Just out of the box question, if I have to ask, like,
Mhm.
recently I've seen that people are switching from ChatGPT to Claude suddenly.
Mhm.
And what was that shift? Do you think, like, what was the main shift towards Claude? And suddenly I see, like, people are normally using Claude more than ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was something that was first came as an AI, like the first comer advantage they had. But
Mhm.
again, Claude is getting that market. So what are your views on that area?
I would say that GPTA wasn't the first one. I think they were actually pretty late entrant into the whole AI LLM based models. What GPT did well was they made it very easily accessible. Like, they
Yeah.
had a distribution advantage because, like, once you are working with Microsoft, like, count the number. I'm sure, like, they have at least, I don't know, 10, 40, 50 million, or even 100 to 500 million sort of operating systems running across the planet. So when you have that sort of distribution already set in, it's easy to ship to everyone, right? So GPT was where a lot of common folk, I would say, and I mean that with all due respect, like, it's not a derogatory term. Let me rephrase that. That is where a lot of core business users got their first taste of AI. That is why GPT sort of became instantly a hit. But going back to something we discussed like 10 minutes ago, it was always in that 80% theme, which is okay, oh, can I ask it to summarize an email? Can I ask it to do some basic search for me? Like very generalist task. Now, Claude, when Claude came in, and Claude has been like here for a long time. So when I say I came in, I mean like when a lot of business people started understanding Claude became very sharp with their positioning. Again, the wedge, which was like the news snippets you would hear is, oh, Claude helped automate through their agents this legal function. So that has
Yes.
an impact, right? So similarly, like I think it was JP Morgan, if I'm not mistaken, who was doing a lot of forward deployed engineers from Claude sitting with their traders and bankers in their office itself. So when people started realizing that AI can do more than just, summarize my email, make me a reminder, or, just create funny, cool pictures, that's where like I think Claude came in. But I would say people should also try Gemini because
Yeah.
the one thing, like, and as I said, like proprietary data, the one thing that a lot of people miss in the noise in the hype is you're talking about Google. I don't think anybody has more data than they do. So I think Gemini is also another
True.
good one for people to use. I mean, not that they're paying me to promote them, but
Yes. So again, like we discussed, so what do you think, like in the early stage AI ecosystem right now, who would be the winner if we have to take tech and distribution? Because we discussed the both points for Claude
yeah.
and ChatGPT, the distribution and tech part. So if we have to look into the early stage AI, so
I
who
mean,
has more advantage?
I think neither of them are early stage AI, to be honest. I think they've combined like the whole AI models. Like if you plug in NVIDIA, then Anthropic, then Google, then Meta, I think, and they've spent something to the tune of, I don't know, 500 odd billion dollars. So calling them early stage is, well, I think
No,
they're,
no, and just not them. If
oh,
we remove them, we'll take the early stage ecosystem. So
the
in that
ecosystem.
ecosystem,
In
yeah.
that ecosystem. I think there's something that everybody's saying, all the time. And I think when you and I chatted about some startups a month ago, you also said that it is becoming very crowded. I agree. So I think for people who would win, they don't have to stand out. I think they need to be obvious to someone. And like
Mm.
that simple line has a very, I would say, deeper business related meaning, which is like, you don't need to be like standing out as the shining star like a Gemini Pro or a Claude. You just need to be like, hey, you know what? I have this problem. I see this person in the crowd that can solve my problem. So practical ways is a very narrow sort of ideal customer or consumer profile. Like for us, that's SMEs. Then a very narrow problem to focus on. Like you don't have to solve for everything. There are $1 trillion worth invested, large language models sitting there who are doing it. So pick up your wedge, your narrow problem. And then distribution, of course, because the way you get to a customer is what really matters. So I think players who have these three things ironed out, narrow ICP, narrow problem, and the distribution, I think would be, I would say, I won't say winners, but would be like slightly ahead of the curve in terms of early stage AI. And I hope, as Flow Pilot, we are one of them.
Yes, I really know that you will be. Um, so I'll have just one last question. That is high conviction opportunities in the current AI landscape. So what do you think about those?
High conviction.
Yes.
Hmm.
Save the best one for the last.
Hmm. I would say vertical agents is first, which is where, if we go back to the Claude example, like that's where, Claude really became more attractive to a lot of business people, like building deep agents for either logistics, field sales, healthcare, like a very vertical focus. That would be high conviction. Then second would be evaluation, safety, and tooling around models like Deccan, where you create that trust
Mm.
certification. And then last one would probably be, again, where you have a very specific business problem you're solving, like solving operations for SMEs or solving for healthcare access on the spot for bikers, like that startup we talked about some time back. So
Yeah.
I think so. The high conviction would be again very aligned. Like I would say, vertical agents, evaluation, and trust certification, and then very SME or very niche approval workflow focused businesses.
Okay. So that's all from today. We had a great discussion over a few pointers and we deep dived into some new topics. It was great talking to you.
Cheers. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Expendables by Fibonacci X. We'll see you next week with new insights from a different sector.